Happy 4th to those who actually celebrate these sorts of things. Hello, welcome. You should probably know me by now. This is Jason Johnson. You're on my YouTube channel. And today we've got 3 things. Now, it's funny. Somebody commented that usually we know that there's bad news going on in the world because I start the videos going like this. But there's a lot going on right now. Some things are good, some things are bad. So, for those of you who are new to this, those who are going to me for the first time, remember this first minute. It's going to be on Instagram. It's going to be on Blue Sky. It's going to be on that thing called Twitter, because I'm going to still call it Twitter. I ain't never going to call it the other name. But the full discussion is on my YouTube page. So please like, subscribe, and share. Really enjoying and really appreciating the feedback and your thoughts as we go into 3 things for today. And it has been, as per the usual, under this administration, this life, a busy week. So first things first. BBL Trumpy, right? The big, beautiful bill thing that's being talked about. What does that actually mean? How does that actually impact you? What does it mean that this thing got passed? That's number 1. There's a lot to talk about with that. I'm going to make it really simple for you to understand. Number 2, the Diddy trial, the Brother Love trial, the Puffy trial, whatever it is you want to call it. But I have some thoughts about what this result is, and I have not talked about this at all publicly before now. I will give you my thoughts because there's certain aspects of this that I think have been missed, and I even say that as somebody who's not a lawyer. And then number 3, believe it or not, we're going to talk some fun nerd stuff. I'm going to talk about Ironheart, which is this new show with Dominique Thorne on Disney, and there's a lot of different conversations about that. But really, whether or not you like Disney shows, or whether or not you like the MCU, or whether or not you like Ironheart, it's really a discussion about Kamala Harris. You'll understand when I get to it. So anyway, 3 things with Jason Johnson today. So we'll start off with this. Literally, as I am filming this right now, the president, we can call him that, of the United States is at the White House signing this bill. There's some really simple things that everybody needs to know about this. And I want to give a shout out to, believe it or not, some congressional Democrats. I want to give a shout out to the We the People, Angela Rye, Joy Reid, all sorts of great people who have done marathons to inform people and talk about this bill. This is Trump's version of Obamacare. This is Trump's version of the stimulus package. This is his big legislative accomplishment of his second and very likely not his last term as titular president of the United States. The bill is bad. It's bad. Like, you know that. If you're watching me, you already know the bill is bad. They're going to cut like 17, 18 something million people off of their Medicaid, which is going to be super expensive. There's all sorts of things in the bill that have nothing to do with health care. They're slashing jobs in the Consumer Protection office, which is what protects you from getting screwed over by companies. They're giving millions and millions of dollars to ICE so that they can basically become a mini Gestapo in the United States of America. They are limiting the ability for courts to actually enforce court rulings, which is something that helps this president. All sorts of terrible things in this bill. And we know how terrible this bill is because a lot of the Republicans didn't even like it, right? You had Lisa Murkowski in Alaska say, this is a bad bill. I didn't want to vote for this bill. She voted for the bill anyway, right? So I want to tell you some quick things about this and what this means for you. You already know the bad stuff, but here's the other bad stuff. What this means is Congress has absolutely abdicated any of their power going forward. Right? And we've already seen that's happened with the courts. The courts basically said when they ruled last year, anything the president does is basically presidential and legal because the president does it. So the Supreme Court last year gave up all of its powers to Donald Trump. That's it. That's over, right? They just reinforced it this year when they said, hey, district federal judges can't do anything anymore that affect everything. They had no problem with it when one random judge would stop COVID protocols under the Biden administration. But now that it's Trump, they're basically saying, no, federal judges can't do that anymore. So the judges were already gone. The courts were already gone. But now this is a complete abdication of Congress. Why? Because in giving Trump this kind of budget, they're basically tying their own hands for years from their ability to use the budget to influence or even sort of give backs to their own communities. It's bad policy. So the real question is not whether or not it's good or bad, because we already know it's bad. The question is why they do it. Well, for a couple of reasons. Reason number 1, you have a good chunk of the Republican Party that basically doesn't care. They're in districts that they think are so safe that no matter what happens to them, they're going to vote for this policy. You got a certain number of Republicans who actually agree with everything that Trump wants. But I also think you have a decent number of them, and I think Lisa Murkowski counts in this category, senator from Alaska. They're people who are afraid of Trump. And when I don't want this is important. When I say afraid of Trump, I don't mean these people are afraid that he'll primary them, right? that can sometimes be an issue, right? There are people like Jeff Flake and Cotton. There are people who've had their Senate careers sort of curtailed or limited or something else like that because Donald Trump doesn't support him. I think these people are physically afraid of him. Physically afraid of him. I mean, we had 2 Democratic senators get shot. You have people show up in Nancy Pelosi. Most of these members of Congress who are voting right now were in the Capitol building when we went through January 6th. They are physically afraid for their and their family's safety to stand up against anything that Donald Trump wants to do. So once you have a legislative body that has been physically, not just ideologically, not just financially, but has been physically intimidated into following the policies of the president, you don't really have a functioning democracy anymore. The only saving grace in all of this, and I'll say real quick, is that a lot of these cuts don't necessarily kick in depending on what state you're in. They don't necessarily kick in until after the 2026 midterms, which tells you something. It tells you that these folks don't want the real bad news to hit while they could still face the consequences. And if you want to see a little bit of sliver of hope, it means they assume that there's still going to be elections in 2026, which not everybody can say with confidence. But that's the thing with the big bill. We no longer have a functioning government. We no longer have 3 functioning branches. They've all essentially given up their power to Donald Trump. And the only way to sort of fight that is by protesting, resisting, complaining, fighting, and voting voting locally, because that's what I say all the time. Number two. I say this all the time. I say this on the air, and I say this on my YouTube channel. I am not a lawyer. I do not play one on TV. I don't pretend to know the law. I haven't talked a lot about the Diddy trial. Why haven't I talked about the Diddy trial? Because I don't really care. I don't care. Here's why. It's not that the trial isn't important. It's not that the ruling that he was found guilty on some things and not others aren't important. It's I don't care about Diddy himself. What I care about is how these kinds of trials are presented to the public and whether or not they have some larger implication on how we're going to live our lives. And the Diddy trial is sort of the last gasp of the sort of Me Too trials that we saw with Henry Weinstein and several other actors from like 2007, 2017 to maybe 2022. Right? He's probably the last of that big bunch that's going to get caught, because I can't imagine that there are any other major prosecutions of people being sex traffickers or abusive women under this administration. I mean, the administration right now is pretty much filled with half a dozen men who've been accused of sexual abuse, harassment, or rape. So I don't think that Diddy's trial, I don't think that the fact that he's going to face any jail time, I don't think it's indicative of any larger trend in American jurisprudence. That's why I've never cared. Right? I thought that, when you look at what happened with Bill Cosby, okay, that was part of sort of Me Too. If you look at the Menendez brothers, you look at, I'm old enough, I remember as a kid, I remember the OJ trial. The OJ trial had huge implications for the rest of the country in the perception of police corruption and police violence. There are trials that end up making a difference in how we see our government, how we see the law. Trayvon Martin mattered, but does Amber Heard and Johnny Depp? No, not really. Amber Heard and Johnny Depp doesn't really have anything to do with how you live your life. Diddy doesn't have anything to how you live your life, right? And I'll say this also just very quickly about this. As much as Diddy may appear to be a terrible guy, and there's every indicator that he is a terrible guy, I don't have any doubts or any questions that he's a terrible person. Being arrested and being put in jail for being a terrible person does not in any shape, way, or form make any person listening to me right now or in the world any safer. It doesn't. It really doesn't, right? This is not an Epstein situation. He wasn't necessarily going out and kidnapping people. Now, obviously, people who are coming into Diddy's orbit, he was abusive to him. He was terrible to them. He did all sorts of awful things to them. But me, you, most of the people you know of, we don't have to walk around in the streets and worry, oh my gosh, I hope Diddy doesn't grab me. And that's not being insensitive to any of the victims of his violence, men or women. I'm simply saying that he may not be as much of a public menace as some of the other people who we've seen go on trial. So that's why it's not been something that I've covered. That's why I don't know that I think it makes that much of a difference in the grand scheme of things. Am I happy that he's being held accountable? Of course I am. Do I think he's probably done a lot worse things he's getting in trouble for? Of course I do. But do I think that this trial falls at the same level, the same importance, the same significance as some of the other major trials we've seen in the last 10 or 15 years? I don't necessarily think so. And we'll see what ends up happening in the sentencing. So, third thing is this, and I want to say this sort of quickly. I said that this is actually about Ironheart. Ironheart is a character, if any of you guys saw Wakanda Forever, it came out in 2022, which was the Black Panther sequel that didn't have Chadwick Boseman. I think that they should have recast him. That's always been my issue. That'll be a whole other conversation. But she was the young lady that was introduced in Wakanda Forever, who had built her own suit, and she was from Chicago, and that movie was okay. And she just had her series, which was supposed to be released 2 or 3 years ago. They just did it now. They just dropped the last ones this week. And there's a lot of conversation about it online, and people are defending the show, and people are attacking the show, and then you've got the right-wing people defending and attacking the show. And I, frankly, like I said, it's a Kamala Harris situation to me. Now, what do I mean by it's a Kamala Harris situation? There is a select few people, and sometimes it can happen with black women, sometimes it happens with black men, sometimes it just happens with content in general, whereas African Americans, certainly those of us who have any kind of voice, but even just anybody who can get online, there is something that comes out, a movie, a TV show, a book, or an elected official, right? Who we may or may not be in complete agreement with. We may not love the show. We may not think the politician is great. We may think the politician is very flawed. But we end up in this sort of an unenviable position of having to vociferously defend that politician, because we know that the majority of the attacks against them are not about where that politician stands, not about what that politician has done, not about their actual track record, but the attacks are based on that politician's right to exist. That's why I said this is kind of about Kamala Harris, right? I didn't agree with everything that Kamala Harris wanted to do. I didn't think that she was necessarily the most dynamic or impressive senator in the world. I thought she was a good senator for the state of California. She was not going to be my choice in 2020 as the nominee. I have heard various things as to whether or not she was the wisest decision for Joe Biden, when he chose a vice president. But at the end of the day, I always thought that she was competent. She was a well-intentioned politician, and she had circumstances she was facing beyond her ability to control. I did not want to defend her on everything that she did, but most of the attacks against Kamala Harris, whether or not it was from within the black community with racism and sexism and ADOS and all these other sorts of things, or outside people, I knew that they were attacking her because she was a woman. I knew they were attacking her because, she had a parent who was an immigrant. I knew people were attacking her because they don't like black folks. So you end up defending this person who you don't always agree with because they do have a right to exist. And that is the case with this Disney show Ironheart and a lot of black art in general. I think Ironheart's an okay show. It's not great. The first 3 episodes are really uneven. It improves in the 4th and 5th. And then the 6th episode, I don't think is particularly good. But most of the criticism that you see of that show when it was being review bombed on Rotten Tomatoes was from racist people and the Tyrone Magnuses of the world, the sort of black people who grift and sort of culture war nonsense, saying, this is terrible and this is woke. People who hadn't even seen the show. They were attacking it because at their core, just like people who didn't like Kamala Harris, they don't think that a Marvel superhero show about a black woman should exist. It didn't matter how good the show was. They don't think the show should exist, so that's why they're attacking it. So we're put in a position of defending the show when, frankly, I don't think the show was that good. But that's the position that you're often in as a black person. We're defending our right to exist in this country as opposed to defending the quality of the work that we actually do, because the work that we do can't ever be seen until we're actually seen as equal parts of this country. Which takes us back to my 3 points. The big, beautiful, terrible, awful, ugly, terrible bill is going to negatively impact your life. Be prepared for it. Get your money, your finances. Keep telling people you should start getting your passports. We're going to have a whole conversation about that. Number 2, the Diddy trial. It's justice in a way for a guy who was a serial predator for a bunch of different people. But it ain't going to change your life. It ain't going to change my life. We've had bigger trials, and we may have bigger trials in the future. And number 3, look, we ain't all got to like every piece of black art that comes out, and every piece of black art isn't necessarily good. But it has a right to exist, whether it's good or bad, because it ain't like the world ain't filled with mediocre quality work created by non-black people. This is your 3 things with Jason Johnson. Enjoy your holiday if you actually believe in that sort of thing. And if not, I'll see you next time.